Hey, what's up? This is 36 Drew coming to you, N3O Clan represent. What we have here is a VOD. This is by request of Lazy Tugga. The primary purpose of this is to test to see the quality that can be achieved in terms of being able to read, let's say, resources and score, and so on when setting Fraps recording program to a higher level and compressing the file to a larger size in the end than what has previously been done. So basically what I'm asking then is after this, if I could get your feedback, and if you could let me know if you'd like them to continue to be in the smaller size where perhaps they stream quicker, download quicker, etc., or if it is worth it to have them in the larger size where there's going to be more quality and hopefully you can see the scores and whatnot. I'm actually not sure how it's going to look when it's done, and if that's affected quality-wise based on streaming or whether or not you download it from file front and so on. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the matchup. This is actually a quick search game that I came across a Chinese Lieutenant Colonel, Sundalo 50, Sundalo 50. When I checked him out after the game, I noticed that he's been playing this game for quite some time. He has actually earned a medal back in the days of vanilla for being the fastest person to reach the discovery age. I have no idea what the time was, but I know that back in the days of vanilla, they gave medals for things like that and most wins, and they also had fastest industrial contests and all those sorts of things. One of the things here is I'm going to try to take heavy advantage of the treasures on the map. Another thing I've also noticed with Brits is since I was able to start with 2 manners, that really provides Brits with a large advantage. The reason being is, well, first of all, you get an extra villager very early in the game, but also with that you're able to gather, well, it provides you with a large amount of experience, which means your first shipment actually ends up coming in about 10 or 15 seconds faster. And when you factor in that food gathers at 0.7 per second, and you have 3 villagers in for an extra, say, 10 seconds, that ends up being between 7 and 10 food. You know, not epic, but it makes a difference in the swing of things with early treasure gathering and so on. It helps you get resources for market upgrades, make sure there's no idle town center time, and so on. You also notice that I'm working on the courier treasure. Always a good treasure to get. Couriers, villagers, they just provide lasting benefit to your economy, and they really can make a huge difference early game. I rescued Buck the Tame Wolf, who's actually going to work to my advantage in this situation. Of course, I will explain the strategy I'm planning on using in probably 80% of games with Brits. I go for my typical longbow pike, which I really shouldn't even say is my strategy. It's more like a borrowed strategy. I've watched a lot of people use it. I think we all know who the original creator of that was, Mr. NP himself. You know, he's been playing Brits since vanilla as far as I know. So he's kind of the king when it comes to that. I also come across a second courier treasure there, guarded by 4 wolves, which of course is really easy to take care of. You don't need a crack shot or anything, you just need to start doing a little bit of micro, hitting and running on your treasure and whatnot. And, you know, if you're not feeling too lazy, sometimes you'll get lazy and I just don't care. But in this situation, I'm feeling like I actually want to do it. Of course, I placed my market a little bit forward. I am playing against a Chinese player. One of the things is when I checked his deck, he has both the 300 food card as well as the card whereby a village in a town center will generate a villager. The problem with that is that you don't know if he's going to go for the really fast age with the 300 food, or if he is going to go for a slower age but a more economical one. You'll notice actually before I age here, I place my wall across. You always have to make sure that you place your wall wide enough that you can put a gate in it. Sometimes that gate is crucial, other times not, but generally it is a good idea to be able to place the gate there. You don't necessarily have to place it right away because, you know, your resources are going to be tight in the early game. But once you start getting shipments in and other things like that, you know, you don't have to worry so much. Due to the fact that I have trees and natural barriers like the trade routes and so on, I'm not going to place my barracks as part of my wall. Not a biggie, but just, you know, that's FYI, that's happening. First card is, of course, 700 wood in Colonial. And you'll notice in this whole kind of game I'm working on the other side for treasures, and he's got that 7 steep rider shipment in fast, which means he's used a 300 food politician. I was going to run those vills politician card to my tower before it got sieged. The one, I suppose, advantage is that seeing that I decided to start training pikemen, and pikemen training is somewhat quick. Also, one of the reasons you want to collect your gold right off the transition is in case you need to call Minutemen, like in this scenario. Because, you know, the Minutemen are going to be useful in hurting his pikemen. Here, just trying to keep my pikes on his cavalry, trying to keep my Minutemen on his infantry, in particular his pikes. And I actually repel his rush, which is quite nice. I think he knows that he'll take a little bit of damage there, and you know, I'm getting a second racks up to start spamming, and it's not a situation that he wants to be involved in. I also ship 6 longbowmen here to aid my early task force. As I've mentioned before, not too many British players are a fan of the 6 longbow card. I am. It's always worked well for me. I don't know if that's a bad thing or whatnot, but you know, I just always try to do that. And here I'm just trying to keep my pikes focused on his cavalry. I actually try to keep my Minutemen on them too, just because I want those to melt. The steep, when in small numbers, will melt fairly easily. And of course the longbowmen just start going to work from their big ranged attack. And here, you notice I'll go back to the other side, continue to work on treasures when I just have a moment of idle time. Yukon is really a great map for that. There's so many large treasures, there's so many treasures that add a large bonus, and so on and so on. And of course, you know, when I placed that market and whatnot, I was securing a second hunt. That's really crucial on this map. Controlling the hunts on this map can be the difference between surviving and not surviving. And here, basically, I'm just trying to keep my longbows at a ranged attack. I'm not worrying about manually splitting them in control groups or anything like that. He's either right now got a wander that's producing exposing cavalry, or he is producing the banner army that produces exposing cavalry. But based on the fact that he's got some pikes in there, I wouldn't say that was true. And I'm just trying to keep my longbows firing from a far range, keep my pikes going. They're a research to build your HP upgrade. It was very essential as a Brit, especially early game. Very essential as most civs. Brits tend to have a bit more disposable, you know, early game resources to worry about that sort of thing. Whereas if you're playing with, say, Ottoman or Russia, where the builds don't necessarily allow for an early market, it may be more difficult to afford that. You know, but those civs have other advantages as well, although I would argue Otto is still kind of weak and needs a boost of some kind, though I don't know what direction needs to go with that boost. So basically here, I want to make sure that I'm not running out of my anti-cav. That's just the way she goes. With Brits, you keep those longbows protected, whether you use muskets or pikes or hussars or whatever you're doing, and the game will be yours. Now I noticed they're trying to siege my market fairly early. Well, of course I'm going to creep in, try to slow that down, you know, take out a few units. It's where the range of longbows is just simply awesome, and you know, it's undeniably great, and you know, it just, you know, it's something that will always be there. I don't know if longbows themselves need a nerf. I don't really think they do, though some people would argue that Brits in their own are a little bit too strong in the current state of affairs. It's tough to say if you ask me. I don't really think that they're an easy civ to play, but I don't think they're a particularly difficult civ to play either. You'll notice on the other side there, one of the treasures I gathered was 300 coin. That's nice to give me the coin needed to provide me with the gold for the second wood chopping upgrade, which of course as Brits is awesome. And actually, if you're playing against another slow civ, like if you're playing in a Brit mirror or Portuguese player or something, you want to even think about using your age up gold plus either chopping 50 more or gathering 50 from a treasure to get that second wood upgrade right off the bat, because you know your economy, generally speaking, is going to be so heavily dependent on wood. If you're going for musket hussar or straight hussar, then adding in longbows, let's say you're playing a Russia player, that's something you can do as well. Russia, by the way, is one match I find to be fairly difficult as a British player. I've tried a lot of different builds. In fact, I played Victor Sweet today, and I even took out 2 villagers early with Minuteman and his blockhouse that he was building right near my base, and I still somehow managed to lose the game. His early mass was just so much, even despite the fact I had a lot more villagers than him. And you'll notice there, just trying to always keep my sights on the cavalry. The longbowmen, I don't really have to worry about microing too much. By default, they won't necessarily attack a bowman next, but once that cavalry gets out of the way, like I said, those steeps will melt pretty good. They don't have a whole lot of HP, and unless they're in bigger numbers, let's say 10 plus, then I'm not too worried so long as my pike numbers are also 10 plus. And again, I continue to go on treasures there. It's about my 7th treasure. When you think about that, that'll add up quite quickly and end up being a significant amount of treasure gathered. By the way, just a reminder to everybody watching, the purpose of this is to evaluate, well, the primary purpose I should say, is to evaluate the clarity of the picture and to see if it is going to be worth it to produce future products with a picture such as this. Now, also, I suppose I could tell you that the secondary purpose of this is, of course, for entertainment and for perhaps learning a little bit, just watching a game. I think most people find VODs at least a little more entertaining than watching a rep, just because it's handy to see keystrokes, individual unit actions, and so on and so on. Here I walk into his base. I go for his wonder. Always a good idea to get down wonders of any of the Asian dynasty civs, China, India, or Japan, because of course once they are down they can no longer have that bonus. It's kind of like losing a factory in many regards. Once that factory is down, that player is never going to gain that back. And right now at this point the score is quite substantially in my favor. I suspect that it's just going to be a matter of time before I am able to corner him and put the final nail in the coffin, so to speak. So I'm continuing to go on, just with my mana boom, just my normal stuff. You notice the power of the double racks, longbow pike. It's just, British has the economy that they can do something like that. I guess a lot of civs can do the dual racks, but it's particularly strong with British, just simply because of the range of longbows. You can do it with France, and yeah, Expo's got a little boost, and yeah, it's still a decent build, and you can kind of do it with Spain. With Portugal, you don't really do it dual, not early game, you really do it single. There's a lot of things like that, but it just seems to be the strongest with Brits, which would probably explain why it is their primary strategy, and there aren't too many others. Interestingly enough, I played a game on this exact same map yesterday, Tattletale, and I don't know if he's been hanging out with Sporting Lisbon too much, but he was playing Portuguese, and what he did actually was he sent, the early expos and musket shipments along with food crates, with of course not sending a discovery card, and he used those in conjunction with Minutemen. He just popped them up to really develop a huge early mass, and I really had a tough time dealing with it. I ended up having to leave the game, although I think the game was his. to be had anyway, so it wouldn't have mattered. At any rate, it was a very powerful strategy. And at this point, you know, my army mass is just so much greater than his, and you know, I just decided there I'm just gonna fight with my villagers. You know, I've upgraded their HP, I've upgraded their attack. They're actually gonna make pretty good mincemeat of that little raiding force that's in my base. You know, they'll pretty much one-hit kill a unit, so he might get 1 or 2 villagers. And actually, at this point, I'm watching my villager chart to make sure they're not going down too fast, because you can afford. I think I have about 50 or something at that point. At any rate, he decides to call it quits, and really he could have called it quits a little while ago. I hope you enjoyed it. If you could please give me a little bit of feedback on this, and I will keep the future VODs coming, hopefully in numbers. Take care.